From drug production and money laundering to power struggles and street wars. Organized crime is still very much around, and at the helm of affairs sits dangerous mafia bosses. In today's video we'll be going over the most dangerous active mafia bosses in 2023. The Genovese family boss. The Genovese family is one of the top 5 families who preside over nearly all organized crime activities in New York. The crime family adopted the Genovese name after a man named Vito Genovese became the boss. Vito Genovese is described by the Mob Museum as ruthless, ambitious and power-hungry. Vito is remembered for his heavily fear reputation, and for being at least partially responsible for the wide-spread influence of organized crime in the United States. In the latter half of the 20th century was one of the most feared mafia lords. Needless to say, he turned out to be quite different from the little boy who arrived in New York aboard the SS Taormina in 1913, with his parents' Judaism was 19. The first time he went to prison, and he served 1 year for possessing a firearm after his release from prison. He met Charles Lucky Luciano and quickly became his right-hand man. Luckily for Genovese, being Luciano's most reliable hitman and enforcer was all he needed to build a name for himself. As Luciano gained more power, Genovese says rose in the ranks. However, it wasn't until the Prohibition era in the 1920s that was officially inducted into organized crime. Both he and Luciano were hired by Giuseppe Joe, the boss Musaria, and eventually became his top lieutenants. In 1930, Musaria ordered Genovese to murder mafia boss Tommy Reina. A friend of Maserati was conspiring with his rival Salvatore Monsanto. Then in 1931, during a fight for supremacy known as the Castellamarese War between Musaria and Maranzano, Genovese contributed to assassinating Musaria in the fall of the same. Both Luciano and Genovese murdered Maranzano in his office, thereby assuming control of the mafia in New York. Luciano went on to create the Commission and the 5 families. Well, assuming command over one of them even made Genovese. According to the Britannica, the purpose of the commission was to democratically mediate between members and serve as judges and executioners. The structure provided a backbone for organized crime in America. Not too long afterwards, Luciano was sentenced for running prostitutes. This singular act promoted Jennifer to acting boss of the crime family. Genovese's promotion was followed shortly by the name change of the crime family. He also gained recognition as a mafia boss for a while things ran smoothly. But in August 1944, was arrested by Italian authorities in connection to a stolen property ring involving a U.S. Army base. He was later released in the summer of 1946, but was arrested again during a meeting of mafia bosses at the Appalachian, in New York, in 1969, on Times Day to no basic diet of a heart attack. And today it is believed that Librio Bellamo is currently the leader of the Genovese crime family. Whatever the case, the Mob Museum attests that the Genovese crime family still engages in an array of criminal activities in New York Wall Street and the internet. The Gambino family boss, named after Carlo Gambino, boss of the family. At the time of the McClellan hearings in 1963, the Gambino family is described as an Italian, American Mafia crime family, and one of the 5 families that dominate organized crime activities in New York City. Founded in 1910 by Salvador de Aquila, the operation spread across New York. The family also has dominating influences in the eastern seaboard that stretches all the way down to California. Their illegal operations include labor and construction, racketeering, extortion, money laundering, prostitution, fraud, hijacking and fencing. Carlo Gambino, also called one of the most successful crime bosses of all time, led the Gambino family from 1957 to 1976. Compared to other Gambino bosses, Carlo is one of the few who never went to jail for any criminal activity after he passed away. Paul Castellano took over the family business. But unlike Carlos, many people within the organization thought that Castellano could have done things a lot better. So they had assassinated. More specifically, John Gotti had Castellano assassinated on December 16, 1985, and with Castellano out of the way, Gotti became the head of the Gambino family. However, he landed in prison after he discovered that his second-in-command, Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano, turned on him with John Gotti behind bars. His son John Gotti Jr. stepped into a bigger role of power within the Gambino crime family. He carried out illicit operations, such as extortion, bribery and threats of violence. Eventually the law caught up with him. he was sentenced to prison. The last person from the Gotti family to rule the Gambino family was Peter Gotti, uncle to John Gotti Jr. In 2011, Domenico took over the Gambino family era. Along with his underboss, Frank Kelly, Domenico kept the family on their toes with a series of criminal enterprises around New York. Domenico stepped down in 2015, giving room for Frank Kelly to become an actual boss. Unfortunately, Frank Kelly was killed outside his home on Staten Island in 2019, although it hasn't been confirmed. Some reports say that a long-time member of the crime family, Lorenzo Mannino, has emerged as the boss of the Gambino family. A 2021 report showed that the Gambino crime family is still raking in millions of dollars, despite decades of declining influence. The Gambino family, along with the other four families, remain the four most organized criminal threat to American society. The Colombo family boss, yet another Italian-American mafia crime family boss, makes the list. This time, it's the boss of the youngest of the five families that dominate organized crime activities in New York. The Colombo crime family was one of the five families which emerged at the end of the Castellammarese War. The first head of the Colombo group was Joseph Profici, though a citizen of Sicily. He immigrated to the United States. In his early 20s, Profici was head of the Colombo group for almost 30 years, during which the group was famous for loan sharking, racketeering and gambling. For most of the 20-plus years, things went smoothly. But in 1960, an internal battle ensued between Profici and some members of the group, Joseph Crazy Joe Gallo and brothers. They felt that when it came to getting a fair share of the profits, Profici always cheated them. This view continued for a couple more years, taking the lives of over 10 people. Profici eventually died of cancer in 1962, and his brother-in-law, Joseph Magliocco, took over the group before Profici died. He implored to always aid Joseph Bonanno, boss of the Banana family, and an ally of his around. This time, Fernando was making plans to become the boss of bosses. To achieve this goal, he told Magliocco about his plan to assassinate Carlo Gambino and Thomas Lucchesi, bosses of the Gambino and Lucchesi families, respectively. Magliocco then assigned one of his top hitmen, Joseph Colombo, to carry out the murders. Surprisingly, however, Colombo betrayed Magliocco and Bonanno by exposing their plan. As a result, Fernando went into hiding while Magliocco had no other choice but to retire. This left the leadership of the group in the hands of Colombo, hence the family name. In a surprising turn of events, Colombo wasn't on the seat for long either, because he was shot and paralyzed in 1974. Carmen J. the Snake, but she showed one of Profici soldiers from the 1961, then took over, but he was apprehended in 1986 on the charges of extortion and federal racketeering from Parasidio to his next of kin Victor J. Orena and then Pacifico's cousin Joseph Russo, who eventually weakened the family. The introduction of the racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations further diminished the power of the Colombo family. Although Andrew Russo, cousin to Procedural, took over the Colombo family after his brother Joseph Russo, he and other leaders of the crime family were arrested in 2021 on extortion charges, and since he died in 2022, while awaiting trial, not much has been said about the new boss of the crime family. Regardless, many believe that the leadership of the family must have passed to someone who's making his moves in secret. The Bonanno family boss, like the rest of the crime families. The Banana family also emerged from the early 1930s. Castellammarese War, after Vito Genovese of the Genovese family assassinated his arch-rival Salvatore Maranzano, slaughter as the head of the Monsanto group was wide open. Meanwhile, before Maranzano died, one of his closest associates was Joseph Bonanno, Joe Bananas. Bonanno took over after Manisano's death, and the group eventually came to bear his name. Bonanno was the boss for over 30 years, and the operations he spearheaded included loan sharking, narcotics smuggling and sales, prostitution and gambling. In 1964, Butana began to plan on being the boss of bosses, and to do that, he had to take out the bosses of the Gambino and Lucchesi families. However, he was double-crossed and was forced to go into hiding. He resurfaced in 1966 and began spreading rumors that he had been kidnapped. Law enforcement officials claimed that he had gone into hiding to avoid the deaths it incurred by planning an assassination and getting exposed. Nevertheless, he was granted sanctioned retirement by the Commission, the criminal board of directors of the five families. And in 2002, he died of heart failure, making him one of the few bosses to die. Of natural causes, Bonanno's death led to the Banana Wars due to a power struggle. The wars led to the death of about 13 mobsters. And even though many men emerged as the boss as a result, none of them could hold the fort for too long, including Bonanza's son, Salvatore. Building the present boss of the Banana family is said to be Michael, the Nose Monkey. So, who spent most of his 2010s going in and out of jail today, the Bonanno family is still in existence and active in both international drug trade and white-collar crimes. The Lucchese family, wrapping up our list of the most dangerous mafia bosses. In 2023 is the Lucchese family boss. The Lucchese family inherited the Lucchesing name after the death of Gagliano. They originally used to be called the Gaggiano family since Tommy Gagliano, but then Gagliano died in 1951. Rumor has it leading to the promotion of Tommy Lucchese. Lucchese was born in Sicily, but emigrated to the United States of America with his family at the age of 12. As a teenager, he worked in a factory until an unfortunate incident occurred, leading to the loss of part of his right hand by his 20s. The Lucchese had begun doing the mob business with Charles Lucky Luciano under the protection of Prohibition era mafia lord Tommy Reina. His early front business was a window washing company until 1921, when he was found guilty of auto theft as a result. He spent a little over a year in prison. He, however, returned to president in 1927 and 19,208 on the charges of receiving stolen goods and murder respectively. All the while Luciano and Reina were strong allies of Giuseppe Joe, the boss. Massaria loss of the bosses. In a bid to cover more territories, the group betrayed him and also murdered his archival, seizing control of the New York underworld and building the modern-day American Mafia, which constitutes the 5 families upon his takeover from Gagliano. Lucchese proceeded to establish a strong relationship with Carlos Gambino by marrying his daughter off to Gambino's son. Both families would proceed to consolidate their strong ties by sharing most of the vast and profitable set of rackets. Although Lucchese died of a brain tumor on July 13, 1967, the Lucchese crime family continues to operate in New York today, with involvement in rackets such as illegal gambling, laboratorying and extortion. Its present bosses, 82-year-old Vic Musso, and he might be behind bars, but he still gives the orders anyway.